Eli Roth.
Yo, Aaron. So, before we get into more of the actual shooting of the thing, I just want to, in the end credits there, have I ever seen, or have you ever seen another film that actually noted the history of the genre in the end credits? Because I think that's like something that everybody who's venturing into a genre that maybe isn't the biggest genre in the world should always do when they do these types of films, because I thought it was just fucking a magnificent choice.
Oh, thank you. Well, you know, obviously there hasn't been a mainstream American. First of all, did you guys enjoy that? Yeah. Thank you. You're the first American audience to see it, so your reaction is hugely important, certainly for the momentum of the movie. So all I would ask is that you tweet wisely, and if you tweet generously, we appreciate it. But no, we're trying to, like, I love those old Italian cannibal movies. Like, I love them, as we all do, and obsess over them and fetishize over them, but I didn't want to just rehash them and redo them. The idea with this movie is that I want to push American horror further and get people exposed to these things. I mean, I think, you know, it's just fine. Like, I love, you know, right now the zeitgeist is very much haunted house movies, which are fantastic. But I'm interested in expanding people's tastes. And the hope with this movie, thankfully, Open Road had the balls to buy this movie, and they're going to do a huge release with it, which is exciting, because this will be the first mainstream release of a movie of this type. So the hope is that people watch this and didn't realize that they could have this much fun with this type of movie, and would go, okay, I know he's always referencing Cannibal Holocaust because he wore the T-shirt, and it's like talked about enough, but what are these movies? Part of what made the genre so difficult to comprehend was that the distributors kept changing the names of the movies. The directors kept changing the names, and Ruggero Deodato and Umberto Lenzi were so competitive with each other, they kept putting the same actors in both movies. And then certain movies, like Dr. Butcher, MD, was parts of other movies. So I remember as a kid going, I thought it was like one or two movies. And I would go to the video store, and I was like, I don't know if I've seen this movie. And sometimes you rent a movie, and you're like, it has a different artwork, a different title, a different director, and it's the same fucking movie you've seen. And I just wanted to sort of, once and for all, very clearly say, these are the movies, this is the order in which they were made, and this is who made them. And hopefully, if you're like a super, like my idea, if I'm like a movie super nerd, so in the way that people watch Kill Bill, and they go, whoa, what's that song? So, oh, that's Lady Snowbird. Oh, what's Lady Snowbird? And they go and seek it out. I think that there's enough of a, you know, now with the internet and the way that you can get movies on Netflix and order them, it's not that hard to find these films the way it worked. And maybe people were searching into the wrong titles. The idea is that we're making a movie that will turn people on to these earlier films, which I think have basically been sort of, not by the fans, but by critics, have been put sort of in the trash heap of horror, and I think they're masterpieces in their own way. So, thank you. That was the idea. And actually, I had a fight with the Writers Guild about it, and I really was like,
what was their fucking hang-up?
They said you got to put the writers in as well, and I said I totally have respect for the writers, believe me. But the point is, the directors' names were changed, which is unthinkable now. But it was a thing in 1980 or 81 to make your movie seem more American, that you change the name of the director, Ruggero Deodato. That's why these guys have 30 different names, which is such a foreign concept now. But my feeling was, and I said to the Writers Guild, it's important for filmmakers and directors just to contextualize the history of cinema, to understand that in the 70s and 80s, if you were a foreign filmmaker, you tried to assimilate, and now look how far we've come. And they were totally like, cool, we get it.
Aaron, I have to say, your character was probably my best delight in film, not just for your magnificent, you know, ending, which was just brilliant, and we'll get into what that experience was like for you, but Quint, who was sitting behind me, every time you made puppy dog eyes in the movie, he would make a sound sort of like, like these little giggles throughout the film every time you made puppy dog eyes, and it just made your death so much worse because you're like unrequited to the end, you know. What was it like being completely destroyed by cannibals?
Well, I mean, I came up under Robert Rodriguez, so I
my first movie was Grindhouse. I dropped out of college to work on it full-time at Troublemaker Studios here in Austin. And so I know Greg and those guys, and I'd been around horror and blood and guts and all that kind of stuff. And I started working at Troublemaker in visual effects, so I ended up doing a lot of that on this movie as well. And I was going to be doing it anyway. And basically, since I speak Spanish and English, I was going to be helping Eli kind of run the shoot. I shot a lot of second unit and direct check second unit. And basically, I had about 6 jobs on this movie. And then one day, Eli and Nicolas Lopez, the producer, were like, okay, we're casting, so let's see who we can put in this role. And they were like, you know, this is a lot like Aaron. Like, I mean, I don't want to admit it, and I don't know if he can pull it off, but fat guy in love, kind of likable and shit, you know, like.
Look, Nicolas Lopez has a theory that literally he was with a girl, and Nicolas Lopez is, you know, was getting shaken off. He's a big dude. He was basically he was with a girl. He was about to make out with her. And a car drove by and went, Lopez, fat guy in love, and it just like. And he's like, and he said to me, he goes, there is nothing sadder than a fat guy in love, because you know he will never get the girl. It's so sad. So that's like a whole thing in his theme of his movies, is fat guy in love. And so that we wrote that character of a guy that he's just chasing a girl that's out of his league.
Yeah, and basically, I mean, I've always been behind the camera for a long time. I directed my first film a few years ago that was South by Southwest, called Blacktino. It's on iTunes. Check it out.
Terrific movie.
And then I basically went into KMB, got my head made. I mean, they pulled out all my chest hair, doing like the proper casting and everything, and it was awesome. I mean, to kind of experience it from that actor's perspective of things, and I really just got into it and dove in. And Eli was like, "Dude, just dive in. Like, do whatever you want. Like, this is your character. Just make it, you know." And so I was just like, "What is the most pathetic thing I can possibly think of?" And it's like myself in high school. So I went in and just dove in, and by the time my death rolled around, it was towards the end of the shoot, and we were in the village in the middle of fucking nowhere, no electricity, no water, no nothing. We had to ride every day in a van about an hour and a half to get to the village, then another to get to the boat, and then another hour and a half in the boat just to get to the village. And then you get off the boat and you're just there and there's nothing. Like, if somebody had gotten hurt, you're fucked. Like,
Okay, so where was the village that was actually, and how pre-existing was everything there? What the village looked like, or how much of it?
There's a section of the village that looks exactly like that. Like, I went into Peru. We had, we talked about where can we get people that have that native look, and they're basically like, you have to go to Peru. And so I went with producer Gustavo Sanchez, who had done Motorcycle Diaries, and we got in a boat and we just started going. They said, this is the Pongo Aguirre. The nickname is Pongo Aguirre. It's the Rio Huallaga, but they call it Aguirre because the last movie there was in 1972, Aguirre, the Wrath of God.
Now, that production didn't go very easily. Would you say you had better access and more efficient filmmaking than Horst Herzog had when he was there?
I mean, I don't know. It's possible.
It's legendary.
It doesn't. I mean, it's not like film friendly. I mean, we went there and there's literally nothing.
Yeah.
And so I was on the river and we went for hours, and the guide said, we're going to run out of gas if we don't turn around. And I saw a grass hut, and I actually pulled up and saw a girl washing clothes in the beach. And we just pulled up, and like they just looked at us like I was, now they're a protected land, they're farmers, and boats will come around to them, but they are so far away, most people in the village have never left. Like, once a week a boat will pick like up the teenage kids and take them to the town for a week, so they know, they get like pop culture drifts back to them. Like, they knew who Selena Gomez was. They had Utah, like one kid had a Utah Jazz t-shirt, but they didn't know what the basketball, like, it was weird. Like, they knew you'd mentioned Justin Bieber, and a couple of the kids knew, but we had to, basically, we came out, and I said to Gustavo, they live in grass huts and sleep in hammocks. And I came out and I said, what do they think? Can we shoot here? Because it looked dressed, it looked ready. There were some sections that were a little more modern, the wood was modern, but there's no electricity, no running water. And he said, well, first we have to explain to them what a movie is. And they went back with a generator and television, and the whole village, they showed them Cannibal Holocaust. And they thought it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen.
I mean, now you're saying that you find this tribe that's never seen ice cubes before, but then you decide to introduce to them the concept of cannibalism?
Yeah,
I mean, it just sounds like it could have gone really
It
bad.
could have gone very
you know,
bad. But it was weird because like when those old women, who we called the pussycat dolls, like the big fat women, when they were cutting the food and like flaying the bones, we were like, oh, they're really good at this.
They were a little too comfortable.
They were a little too comfortable with that. But they were so nice, and the way we paid them, and we paid everybody. Basically, the people were getting in a day what they would make in like a month of work. So they were so happy when we were shooting. They loved being extras. And we took out some of the modern stuff, but the way we paid the village, because they can't get anywhere to spend the money, is there's 103 grass huts in the village, and we put metal roof. We roofed the village. They're like, we want roofs, because when in the rainy season, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
That's all they wanted. So, and we built a kitchen for the school, and we bought them CD players. I mean, these kids, the first day had never seen Ice Cubes, and they were like 2 weeks into it, we're like, shh, not delete that one. Like these kids were taking selfies and iPhone videos. They want to be. We had the kids doing the slate. If we were thirsty, I'd say, Homer, and coconut, and Homer go, ah, and takes a machete in his teeth and climbs up, chops a coconut. It was incredible. It was this wild. I mean, it was dangerous as fucking hell. I mean, the kids, they would tap you in the turn around in the morning, and one kid's like holding a python, and he's like, what? I'm like, what is that? They're like, do you want a python for the movie? And I'm like, of course I do. What can I do with this? And I thought, I really would love to drop this. I was like, this would be really funny if we dropped it on Magda and Kirby. So, of course, I went up to Magda and I was like, I have a great idea. I'm going to drop a snake on Kirby's face. She's like, no, do it on mine. And I went to Kirby, I'm like, I have a great idea. Wouldn't it be great if I dropped it on Magda's face? She's like, no, I'll do it on mine. I'm like, oh, maybe I'll just do it on both of you guys. So that's a real python. And we dropped it, and if you watch it and you go freeze frame, that thing is this far, and the fangs are open. But the first day of shooting, it was crazy. Like we get to this village, and the first thing we're trying to do is like the Colonel Kurtz arrival at the mouth of hell with the heads on the spikes. And so we got the body parts, and everyone is, and we based all of the tribal killings and deaths, everything on an amalgam of real rituals. It's really National Geographic, the colors of the tribe, the leader.
See, I mean, I've read National Geographic my entire life, and I love their videos, but they never have done a really good cannibal film. You know? I mean,
no, they haven't, and that's why I had to step in. It almost said National Geographic Presents. But the first day when we were shooting, I remember we had Aaron in the boat, everyone's tied up, we get them in the canoes, heads on the spikes, and we're about to roll, and they're like, and I'm like, what is that? And these 2 fucking boats full of Christian missionaries from Super Church in Texas. They're from Texas. And they came out, and they were like there, going down the river, converting villages to Christianity, and they pull up and they see heads on spikes, and dead bodies, and people like holding up heads and arms, and the kids tied up, and they were like, the devil is here, the devil. They were 100, they had speakers, they were gonna play music, they were like, the devil is in this village, and someone was like, no, it's not the devil, it's Eli Roth. They were like, what? They were so fucking pissed that I'd beat them to the village.
I have to say, this Fantastic Fest has given me a completely new perspective on the Spy Kids trilogy, because
you've seen Daryl's
Machete, you see Alexa Vega's ass hanging out, and then you gave us Daryl did.
Full frontal Daryl Sabara.
What's going through your head when you do stuff like this, Eli? It's just like, tell me.
Well, actually, Daryl, the casting of Daryl came through Aaron. You know, once we cast Aaron, he said, you should watch Daryl. He's like, have you seen Daryl Sabara? And I had met Daryl before, and Aaron's like, you've got to see World's Greatest Dad. And I watched World's Greatest Dad, and Daryl, it's the fucking great Robin. It's fucking, it's dark as fuck. It's so good. And Daryl was so good in it, and I had lunch with him, and Aaron had been telling him, because Aaron relocated from Austin to Chile, to make movies with Nicolas Lopez, and he said, we've got to put Daryl in it. So Daryl came down, and he was so funny. So it's just a pleasure.
Awesome. Let's get some questions from the audience, and I'm going to repeat the questions, so hold off before answering, okay? Right here.
Great movie, by the way, although I think the trip to Smiley's that for Space and Tim took us on wasn't really a good idea in hindsight. After seeing this right now, get some barbecue, we'll see. Yeah. But it seemed like a really grueling shoot. Did you look to guys like Rivero for advice, maybe some stories that might guide you on how to do the production.
The question is, it looks like a difficult shoot. Did you go to Ruggiero to get advice on shooting campaigns?
Well, I had actually kind of gotten a lot of great advice from him when we were shooting Hostel 2. And I was like, how did you direct the natives? And he told me, like, he's like, I mean, I can't imitate him the way, like, I can't remember the story exactly. But he said he couldn't get them to do anything. Then he went, hut, 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 and then we go, hut, 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 hut. And that was how he had to direct them, that was the speed at which they moved. And after the first day, their feet had blisters because they'd never run before because they used blow darts for everything. So it was like, but basically the way it was really everything I learned from shooting Man with the Iron Fist in China, from shooting Aftershock in Chile, from shooting Hostel in the Czech Republic, just shooting around the world. And all these different shoots really prepared me for it. And I went to the locations, even like walking through the bulls, I would say, when they escape the village. I mean, there's just cows and bulls, they're just walking everywhere. You have to watch out for the wild horses that might attack. And I said to the guys, I was like, is it safe to do this? Like, will they gore me? And they're like, that one might. So I didn't tell the actors this, but before the take, I'd be like, guys, it's totally safe, don't worry. And I would walk through the bulls and walk back. And I'm like, oh great, let me shoot. And I was like, please don't get killed, please don't get killed. But like, things like the river, we're in Peru, we're about to shoot, Justine going in the rapids. And we had a stunt girl that was going to do, because it was too dangerous to throw our lead actress in the river. And so we have a stunt girl, and I'm sitting on the rocks with the cameras, and I just see this. And I'm like, what's going on? And the guy's like, it's okay, it's no problem, no problem. I'm like, that girl, she looks like she's not going in the water. She looks like absolutely terrified, in fact. Is she ready for this? Have we rehearsed this? I go, yeah, she hasn't, okay, yeah, it's her first time. I'm like, this is her first stunt? They're like, yeah. I'm like, wait, they're like, we told you, there's no stunt girls in Peru. She's an actress, she just wants to be in the movie. And we're like, her job is to jump in the rapids. I assume no. And I just see like some talking on the walkie. They go, wait, 1 second. I just see our AD with the cigarette go, roll camera. And he kicked her in the water. And she fucking went down and 3 guys caught her. It was terrifying. It was like that. And then, but even getting to the village one day, there was a flood in the Andes, and we had to get in like 5 different motorboats. They're like exactly what you see in the movie. Those are the boats we got to and from set every day. And there was a flood one time. It was like impossible. There were trees swirling. We went through rapids. The boats almost tipped over. I was like, this is gonna be it. This will be my Twilight Zone. I hope I go down. It was terrifying, but I also felt that it's the only way you could get that kind of sweat, those kind of performance, I wanted it to start off like a very safe movie, like in New York City, like, yo, where You've Got Mail or Spider-Man. And then when they get to the village, you're in some terrifying documentary.
Right up front row.
When looking at like the rituals and sacrifices and everything like that, beyond watching all the other cannibal movies, is there any research you can do?
The question is, when going through the rituals, is there any research you do beyond just looking at movies?
Oh, no, I mean, movies are the inspiration for why you do the movie, but first of all, our costume designer, Elisa Macedel's there. Let's give her a round of applause. She was fantastic. Elisa, we went through all these different National Geographics from Brazilian tribes, Venezuelan tribes. Not only did we look at the makeup, the dress, the hierarchy, we very carefully studied what are the rituals, how do they treat invaders? And one of the things they do is they'll get the biggest, most intimidated to sort of make everyone else docile and get them into submission. They'll take the biggest one and first they do one eye, then they do the second eye, then they cut out the tongue, and then they go one limb at a time, then they do the head for last. They do cook them. They do we really based it on, I mean, it's not that this exact tribe, it's a mythical tribe, but we based it all, I mean, there are a lot of the rituals that they do. For the female genital mutilation, those are the tamest photos. I mean, the photos, and those are real photos. The photos that we got that were just available of FGM, which 2 million 90% of the girls in Somalia go through it, and 2 million girls every year, this happens to them. And the photos were like, I was like, I can't even put this in the movie because it's too upsetting. Audiences will feel like tricked into seeing this most horrible image. So all the stuff, the sharpened stone, it's actually much worse. It's glass bottles. It's so horrific, and so many girls bleed out. It's one of these things that, you're like this white person in the suburbs, and you feel like you have, it's something horrible that you feel you have absolutely no control over. And that's what I wanted to try and capture, is this feeling of how our phones now make us feel like we're part of something, but basically that hitting the retweet button really isn't enough. I actually heard from the Invisible Children guys, because they heard there was a masturbation scene about the leader, which obviously is a reference to 2012. And this idea of like you're following something, and then they're like, oh, they're jerking off in the street. And really, does anything you do actually, what is the difference? What is activism and what is what we call slacktivism, which is basically, are people hitting the retweet button because they want to help, or are they doing it because they want to appear good, or they want to actually feel better about themselves? So I'm not saying one way or the other. I was just pointing out with like Justine getting charmed by this guy who basically, she's not going to listen to her father, which is the law. She's going to follow this guy. It's like, you don't need that anymore. You shame people and use your phones. So, but everything, all of the violence, all of that stuff. I mean, the only place we took liberty, can you make a human pot brownie? I don't know. We'll never find out. It's very possible, but that I figured is the creative license.
I would think it would need more pot. I mean, like, to be like truly
To be true, well, yeah, we had a whole thing about them mixing with the ayahuasca. That's why the dad says he says careful, it's Peruvian, it's strong. Yeah. Hopefully, a little ADR covered up.
Okay. Any other questions out there? Is that somebody raising a hand in the background?
Yes.
Yes. Hello.
Far left.
Yes. Yes, you.
Yeah.
I guess I know. After saying that the tribes people didn't even know what a movie was at any point before you started shooting, there was any concern about how they would be portrayed?
Was there ever any concern by the tribe about how they were going to be portrayed to the outside world?
No, they loved it. They knew it was a movie, that it was mythical, and that it's. And actually, the way they're portrayed, even though what they're doing is brutal and savage, they're like cooking in the kitchen, and they're tasting the food, and they're laughing, and they're joking around, and they're making, they're prepping the food. It's actually like a normal. They're not animals. They're not like just wild people that are killing it. It's like these are invaders that have come. But once they're sort of contained, then life just kind of goes on in the tribe. And I think they just loved. They weren't concerned about that at all. They thought. They were really psyched that we were rebuilding their village, and they had a great sense of humor about it. And even the way I directed them, like, it was incredible. Like, they got it so quickly that when they were grabbing, they would talk to the actors, and the girls would say, like, really, you can grab us and pull. Like, as soon as you yelled action, they're like, ah, and then as soon as you yelled cut, like, all the little boys would pick up the girl's hair and blow on it, and everyone's like, are you okay? And then at the end of the day, we all would shower, like, everyone would go like we all bathed in the river and washed off the blood. It was like a crazy, weird community we had.
Next question? Hard to see. Yes, right here.
So with this, I'm fascinated at this interaction with the tribe. Is there going to be any footage on Blu-ray or anything of y'all interacting or doing things with them or whatever?
The question is, will there be further behind the scenes look at the interaction between the tribe and the crew on the making of the Green Inferno?
Yeah, I mean, we knew while we were making it that what was going on. I mean, for example, absolutely, to answer your question, we had such a great, there were so many different stories that we were telling behind the scenes. The one that I'm really sorry I missed is that I was kind of curious, there were some people in our makeup department. I mean, first of all these guys are like super ripped, and we had gay crew members, and I was like, are any of the guys, there's 300 people in the village, I was like, are any of them gay? Because I could see them talking, I'm like, is that a thing here? And the concept of homosexuality, they didn't even, like, they had asked the guys in the village, and the guys didn't even know what they meant. The very notion that you would pick one or the other, and I was like, oh, it's like there's no electricity, it's dark at 7:30, and everyone's kind of fucks. And that's just how it is. And the idea of sort of just delineating that you are one or the other, they like thought that was such a novel concept. They're like, well, why would you? So then I found out that there were crew members that went on a hike to the waterfall. There were crew members that really liked that brought their characters with them, that are like drag queens. And they brought their character, and they were explaining, there's apparently, we found out, like a huge jungle drag scene. That there are people in the jungle that love drags, doing drag shows. Like, I can't explain it. Like, we were at this little rural inn, and then we found out the cook found out that we had crew members that had brought characters, and it was his dream to do a drag show. It was literally like Priscilla Queen of the Jungle. Like at night, we would sit there and watch them do like Whitney Houston drag shows. And apparently there was a trip to the waterfall with a bunch of these guys in drag, and they all had some huge, crazy orgy. And the villagers were blown away by fucking a man in a woman's clothing because they'd never seen that before. And they were like, "Wah!" And it was just like, I don't even know why I'm telling the story. It's so it makes it sound like we were having some crazy. This was after shooting rap, and I was so mad that no one told me about it, and I didn't bring my camera. I was like, that would have been the best I was like, I would have, never mind. Nobody invites me to anything. I'm the director, like, I don't invite him. Then it's work.
Any other questions on there? Yes, in the center.
It sounds like the tribe was fine with being how they were portrayed. Any response from the Peruvian government on this?
What did the Peruvian government, or what sort of involvement did they have in this?
Well, the Peruvian government, I mean, this is one of the first bonded movies that shot in Peru. The Peruvians loved it. The horror movies are huge in Peru. In fact, there was one person that had left the village that like, there were people on the production that had all seen Hostel. They were so excited about it. We showed cuts to the Peruvian crew. They loved it. I mean, I think that Americans are I'll be honest, are way more fucking sensitive about this than anyone. Everyone's like, what are the Peruvians going to say? They don't give a fuck. They think it's hilarious. And they're like, stop treating us like we're idiots. Like when people actually, honestly, like when people bring up to the Peruvians, they're like, oh, they're going to be offended by how they're portrayed. They're like, we're not fucking idiots. We can tell it. You think we can't tell the difference between a fucking movie? Like we're going to go to the movie and think that people think, like we understand that people know what a movie is because we know what a movie is, guys. Nobody gives a fuck. It's a horror movie. Everybody had fun. Is the truthful answer.
Okay, so next is Beyond the Green
Beyond the
Inferno.
Green Inferno.
And you're tag teaming off with Nicholas on that one, right?
Yeah, we're working on the story with
What's
her.
that about? Like, I mean, how has you and Nicholas sort of become this unit of joy that makes films down in South America?
Well, we found a freedom down there that I never felt in Hollywood, and a terrific group of people, you know, with obviously their collaborators like Lorenzo. If you didn't you guys see Aftershock? Yeah, so it's a lot of things, you know, Pollo, Ariel, Lorenza. You know, we look at what Almodovar does and Woody Allen does, and people that have their troupe of people that they like to work with, and that's fun. And I found that everyone in Chile moves at a speed that's like 2 movies a year. And I think that other people in Hollywood make 1 movie every 2 years. And right now, I'm in a place in my life where I'm all about not overthinking it and staying creative and trying to get better as a filmmaker, but pushing the boundaries and being experimental and not trying to make every movie the most important thing in your life, making it all life or death. Just make a great, entertaining time with the movies. Do it, get it out there, on to the next one. And so we're moving at a very fast pace, but I've also found people that I can write with. You know, I've started writing with Aaron and Nicholas, so it's sort of like become this, I feel like I walked into a really cool collective of filmmakers that think differently. You know, we mix the whole thing in Chile. We do, like all of us, a mostly Chilean crew. I could have never done this movie in America, certainly with the safety violations. But there's an energy and a spirit and a speed that we trade off writing stuff. Like, okay, why don't you take a crack at the first draft, then I'll write the next draft. Then the 3 of us will get in a room and let's all just sit, you know, let's go to dinner and let's just sit there and crank it out. And we're all kind of feeding off that creative energy. And because you're so remote, because you're so isolated, there's nobody to tell you no, or nobody to tell you you can't do that, or you should be spending 3 months developing this. We just kind of follow, it feels like film school, where you're just sort of, no one's really looking, you just kind of follow your own creative gut.
Awesome. Last question from the audience? Yes, up there.
What's the going rate for buying an R rating for this movie?
What's the going rate for buying an R rating for this movie?
You know, the ratings board's very cool. I will say this, like, I had a great talk with the MPAA. You know, they appreciated how I handled things like the inspection scene and the FGM, that there's only a little bit of nipple nudity. And we talked about it, and I said, people aren't going to see this movie, you know, expecting Despicable Me 2. They're going to see a film that I've directed. They're going to want to see something that's harder than Hostel 2. And if you look at the violence in the movies lately, you know, Evil Dead, I'm like, it's not even the zombie stuff, like that scene where you're shooting nail guns into hands and the chainsaw through the mouth for 30 seconds. I said, there's a template for what is acceptable violence right now. I said, that is today's R-rated movie. And yes, you have The Conjuring, totally different type of story, but for a story that requires, I said, people are paying for those moments. If you buy your ticket to Green Inferno, you want to see someone get eaten, and I've spent a long time cock teasing the audience before Jonah's death. Like, I really want you to care about the characters and know the dynamics and be on the journey with them before we get into the gore. And they totally, like, they know, it's weird, like Quentin's had a similar experience where they kind of get that my name on a horror movie is going to connotate a certain thing, and that's what people are paying for. And they were amazingly open-minded and cool about sort of letting me make the movie that I wanted to make, which I tell you, I've never had that experience with any other organization in any other country. I feel like the MPAA understands you guys way better than you think. They know what the horror fans are paying to see, and it was very little back and forth, and it was a totally cool, great experience.
So this is the R-rated cut?
This is the R-rated cut, what you just saw.
All right. Well, Eli, thanks again for coming out.
Thank you, guys.